Hello, everyone, and welcome into Garden of Doom. And this week we have a special episode where we're going to talk about vampires and vampires from a particular perspective. And that perspective is not mine. The entire audience gasps and sighs in relief. Our special guest today is See the Superior, and her self-written intro is virtual assistant by day, YouTuber and geek enthusiast by night. So welcome in, C. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I love the topic of vampires. Full disclosure, I am not the authority on vampires or anything in the occult. I just have like a passion for literature and film. And I love to hear myself talk.
Okay, well, good. That's sort of me too. She's lying, of course. She is a vampire. This is her attempt to making the cover.
You are now listening to the Garden of Doom with Jeff Lipman.
Sometimes the world no longer needs a hero. Sometimes what it needs is a monster.
Audience, let me give you a little bit of background on how I know See the Superior. And truth be told, I don't really. But we were both with an outfit called Unpopular Review. I was on the wrestling side. She was on the entertainment side, primarily. She predated me with that group, so I never really quite understood the structure of it all. But we had some overlap. There were some overlap, especially with the Snyder Cut of Justice League, which the Unpopular Review entertainment section did a review show on it, and check it out. I'm not with Unpopular Review anymore. I don't think C is either, but check it out. They did one, and for the most part, I think they loved it. Now, me and this other guy, Caden, who were on the wrestling side, and neither one of us is with Unpopular Review any longer either. But we didn't love it, and so we did something. Well, it was his idea. It was called the Caden Cut.
The Caden Cut.
Yeah, so check that out too if you want to hear our thoughts on the Zack Snyder Justice League, because for whatever reason that movie is polarizing. It kind of reminds me of certain fandoms where they just have to love it so much, but then I hear from other film aficionados who seriously love it. Anyway, that's not our topic today. That is just a little backstory as to how myself and C got acquainted. We became friends on Facebook, and we have some common interests, and so I recruited her to talk about some vampiric issues, which so she was reading books on vampires. I've read a bunch of books on vampires. Probably some of them are the same, most are probably different. I have a feeling she read all the ones I read. I probably just didn't read the ones she read, and we'll talk about film too. So See, I'm going to let you kick it off, and you can tell the folks a little bit about you, where they can find your stuff. And by the way, this is a free plug zone. And all my guests are free to promote any of their stuff. And if they ever want to use the audio, they can use it too. Just I ask that they give it a week or so, after it drops here. But anyway, See, just dive on in.
So I do sometimes appear on UPRE still every once in a while. So shout out to them. I do have a YouTube channel where I talk more about anime. If you're into anime, you can reach me at See the Superior on YouTube. And I also have a virtual assistance company where I help business owners to handle their daily tasks behind the scenes so they can focus on the bigger picture of their business. But outside of that, I do like to dabble in literature and film. So this is what we're talking about today. So not long ago, I made a post, or I reposted a post about a book, a little known book that was written way back in 1819 called The Black Vampire Legend of St. Domingo. And I've never heard of it before. I was just really shocked to see that this was a book written about a vampire, specifically a Black vampire, many, many years before Bram Stoker's Dracula came out. So Dracula came out in 1897, and this book was first released in 1819, which is really cool because for years, people thought the first appearance of vampires in literature, like fictional literature, came from Dracula, but it was actually from this book called The Black Vampire. And Jeff saw my post and he, invited me on the show. So I went on the journey to find this book. Like first I checked the library. They had like one copy in the whole of the United States. And I checked Amazon and they had it. Some people go straight to Amazon. I like to avoid it, but that's another topic of discussion. So it's a really short book and it's about 100 pages long, but it is not, let me say, it's a product of its time. So it wasn't an easy read by any means, but it was really informative. So pretty much not to go too in depth about the book because we do have other topics, but it's about this slave who was killed by a slave master. His name is Anthony Gibbons, the name of the slave. And he comes back to kind of seek his revenge on the slave master and almost the rest of his family, pretty much. But it was a really interesting read, like I said, in the way that you would have to take yourself out of modern times and plant yourself into that time period.
But
and
it's
the reason,
classic revenge story.
Yeah, classic revenge story, really interesting.
And I wonder, did you see any? I'm sorry to keep speaking over you.
No, go ahead.
Did you see any parallels? Because I mean, it struck me. It's the plot of Candyman, which, of course, the plot of Candyman, it seems actually to be the plot of this book. Do you think that maybe the makers of Candyman might have been influenced by this book?
You know what? There are some similarities because when he does return as a vampire, he ends up marrying his former slave owner's wife. So there is like this, I guess, obsession to a point that he had with the female lead, but more in a way to get his revenge, not necessarily like a sexual or romantic connection. But yeah, you know what?
It's a little Oedipal once removed, and you know what? It's not that far a cry to talk about Jonathan Harker and Mina Harker with Dracul.
Mm-hmm. It's, you know what? I think maybe it could be a possibility that there wasn't some influence there, even though this is a lesser known book. But those in the know obviously would be in the know.
Well, yeah, Bram Stoker would have been one of those in the know, and he didn't pull this out of nowhere. So I'm sure he had influences as well.
Probably, but there, of course, vampires existed in like folklore and word of mouth for many, many years prior. But actually, to be written down in a fictional tale, I think this was the actual first one. But that takes us to a couple years later. So Black vampires kind of disappeared for many years, up until maybe like the 60s, I would say. And again, like I said, I'm not the authority on all things vampires. I just know like a couple key points.
Well, you're the authority here, so stop saying.
So there's a film that I recently saw called Blackula. I'm sure you've all probably heard of it.
Of course.
Yes. So I
now not the Eddie Murphy version.
No. Okay, that one's a couple years later, even though I did watch that one.
Like 1974.
Blackula?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it came out like 1972, but somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And let me be the first to say that the 70s were not my favorite era of film. Like, I'm not into 70s movies, like, whatsoever. So it was a task watching this movie. But again, it did have the vampire theme. He was originally a prince from some African nation. He goes to visit Dracula to request his assistance with ending the African slave trade, at which point Dracula turns him into a vampire, pretty much.
Now, why did he think that Dracula would help him with that? what part of the tale of Lad Teshpesh says that he's interested in people of color other than putting their heads on pikes?
knows. I don't know if maybe he was just like, just trying to get something going. He was like, look, United States clearly isn't going to help. So let me try over here in Transylvania.
Good point. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, maybe the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't know.
Yeah. So this movie was interesting in the way that it had, of course, it was essentially a love story. After Dracula came out, people tended to like romanticize vampirism, when originally it wasn't that way. These were scary demons, stories that you would tell to explain away illness and stuff like that. But later it became romanticized. And this is like the film adaptation of the romantic vampire in Blackula.
Well,
So,
sure. Well, also the 70s. And by the way, shout out to our producer today, Anthony Missionary Thomas of Wrestling Soup fame. He's confirmed that 1972 is the correct year. And yes, of course, there were a lot of blaxploitation films then,
yes.
which we all know. And the Wayans brothers, made an art of it. And I'm going to get you sucker. So.
Uh-huh. So that was the era of blaxploitation. But I will say that they tried to give him more substance than they usually would in film of that time. He was, very intelligent. He was, capable, powerful. He was in love with this woman. And it wasn't too stereotypical as far as the main character, the side characters, maybe so. But it was an interesting film in the way that it gives you a little insight, a little more insight on things.
Yeah, Blackula was, I mean, the name is probably the worst part of it.
Yes.
But I guess it is grabbing it. If you want to see the movie, it's a pretty simple message.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right about all that. And of course, coming from royalty and wealth, it was a different story. So now he came to the United States, what year, what was this taking place in when he visited Dracula when, and he came to the U.S. when? Around, I mean, ballpark.
I'm not sure exactly. At the beginning, when the movie starts, I'm not sure what year it's supposed to be. I'm assuming, of course, sometime around the slave trade, but I don't think they put an actual date. And if they did, I must have missed it. But of course, the bulk of the film takes place in the 70s, and it's about him trying to find or rekindle a romance with who he believes to be the reincarnate of his lost love. So that took place mostly in the 70s. But
that's funny because the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula stole that. They used that because that was not in the book Dracula.
What year did that come out? I've never seen the movie.
Oh, you never saw Bram Stoker's Dracula? It was probably in the 90s. I'm sure our producer will put it in there. I would say 94-ish, somewhere around then. But, in the book Dracula, which, I mean, the way of the storytelling is very interesting. It's basically letters, and there's no narrative. It's all the narrative comes from letters from various parties to various parties that strung together tell a story, not always in the right order.
Mm-hmm.
But the Mina Harker obsession, I think, was just Dracula wanting what he wanted, or he sort of absorbed some of that passion from eating Jonathan Harker, or whatever the case was. But in the movie Dracula, which was sort of a clumsy attempt to explain how vampires came to be, and they made Dracula the first vampire, at least that we know of in that movie. Mm-hmm. And basically it was that his wife died, and he blamed God for it, and God cursed him with eternal life without her and turned him into a vampire. And the same actress, I think it was Winona Ryder, I'm not sure about that. She
this is the one with Keanu Reeves in it?
Yeah, he's Jonathan
okay.
Harker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, oh God, I can't remember the guy's name. He's a pretty famous actor. Anyway, he does a lot of overacting in as Dracula.
Mhm.
I want to say Daniel Day-Lewis, but it's not Daniel Day-Lewis. It's like the other guy who became famous around the same time. Um, anyway, it'll come to me as soon as we go off there. It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But the same actress played both of them. And when he saw Mina Harker, he thought it was the reincarnation of his wife. And in fact, it may have been. Um, but that's weird because it wasn't in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, the novel.
Mhm.
So possibly that was stolen from Blackula too, or maybe I missed an entire subtext or plot point in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I have read more than once. Once as a like in high school, and then once as an adult. But
Mhm.
maybe I missed it both times.
But you know what? Reincarnation of a lost love seems to be a reoccurring theme with these vampire films because a couple years later, um, The Vampire in Brooklyn came out, Vampire in Brooklyn with Eddie Murphy. And of course, that takes place in the 90s in Brooklyn. And he is on this mission to, um, I guess, find his lost love or find the last remaining vampire who's a half vampire. I think her name was Rita. And she is like a reincarnation. She doesn't know she's half vampire. And I guess there was some subplot with her mother who passed away. But long story short, that was another film that featured, of course, a Black vampire. And the first time I watched it for the first time last night, I've never seen this movie before. So as I'm watching it, it gave me very much Coming to America, just with like vampires. It was Eddie Murphy does his thing where, of course, he plays multiple characters. He has on, the makeup and different things. And it just struck me again how vampirism and romance seems to intertwine themselves. Like the vampire became sexy suddenly from its origins. And that's just really interesting to me. And the fact that it's played by Eddie Murphy and he has on like this wig and contact lenses, it was hilarious.
It's very cheesy, and this was Eddie Murphy was a giant star there, and I'm not sure this movie helped him any. But he was a giant star in comedies. But he also sort of was one of the pioneers of the cop buddy comedy, but serious. Like it had elements of both, and
Mhm.
sort of that really didn't exist before the '80s. Things like Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours. Um, Even like some of the Schwarzenegger movies where there was comedy and action in the same movie. That was sort of a new thing.
Mhm.
Now it's everywhere. But people, I still think, weren't buying Eddie Murphy as anything other than a comedian, and I think he wanted to do more, but he couldn't quite reconcile. Giving it's like he didn't have an editor. He was sort of going in both directions, or maybe he didn't have creative control. Anyway, yeah, that movie was not my favorite. I actually prefer Blackula to Vampire.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting because I actually thought it was a funny movie. Like it was cute. There wasn't much substance there, but of course it's a comedy, so it was a good time for me. But I'm shocked that you didn't enjoy it.
I didn't say I didn't enjoy it. I just preferred one to the other. Like to me, to me, vampires aren't funny, so I don't want
Okay.
my vampires to be funny. Like I didn't like Once Bitten, and I liked Love at First Bite, but I was like 10, so of course
Mhm.
I liked it. And it's just it's just a silly movie. But
Mhm.
to me, vampires, I mean, it's sort of like the opposite of God. It's like the demon,
Demonic, yeah.
here forever, lifeless but undead, but accrues knowledge, wealth, wisdom, and uses those all for ever better schemes of evil,
Mhm.
with only a few weaknesses. And this is sort of I mean, almost like the Mandarin in Shang-Chi,
Uh-huh.
sort of the same thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right that the vampire became like a romantic figure, and and Blackula, it was a little horror, a little Billy D. Williams, Mahogany movies,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff. But you also had that was the era of Superfly and
Yeah.
Shaft and all that. So there had to be sort of the music and the thugs and the this and the that and the fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, but I think it's great that that book in 1819 exists, because if I hadn't encountered you with that post, obviously every people, every country, every island, every region has its own lore and legends, but a lot of it overlaps. But if somebody was to say something like, what do you think about the America's, Black and African American lore? You're probably going to think mostly things tied to voodoo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's probably the big one, and then Candyman probably comes up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but to know that the vampire was, the first literature, or at least that we know of, was written by an African American in 1819. I mean, that's an amazing find, and that's something I damn sure didn't know, and I bet a lot of people didn't know it as well.
Yeah, you know what? The author was disputed after the author was actually, well, let me say this. The author of The Black Vampire, they had the pseudonym of Uriah Derrick Darcy. And later there was a man that came forward and said that he wrote it. His name was Robert C. Sands. But the popular belief of the author, people believe it to be this other guy. His name is Richard Varick Day. And he was a very religious figure. And I think he was theologian or something along those lines. And that was the reason why he kind of had to separate himself from the work and allow Robert to take credit for it, because again, his religious beliefs, and at the time um, it was kind of polarizing, because it does have that undertone of freeing the slaves and all of that. So it was actually written by a white guy about a Black vampire, which is interesting. But back to
Oh,
Vampire in Brooklyn.
okay.
Like I said, I did enjoy the film, and it
Clearly.
does have that romantic aspect. And you did mention something about this godlike complex of vampires, and when you see where they originally started, of course, as demonic figures, and then it does come into the romantic aspect, plays really heavily in vampirism, and also their power sets became so varied. Like you have the vampires that can read minds, you have the vampires that could turn into bats, vampires that can turn into anything, like we see in Vampire in Brooklyn. So it does seem that the longer the lore goes on, the more things are tacked on, which is interesting.
Well, that's all lore. I mean, you're always trying to make your protagonist more and more powerful, and the villains more
Uh-huh.
and more. I mean, when I'm older than you. I grew up probably 70s, 80s comic books, and Black Panther was basically Daredevil with sight. Now when
Mhm.
you see the movies, Black Panther has a vibranium suit, which is bulletproof. Gives him super strength. He can call upon the power of the Panther and do energy rays. When I'm
Mhm.
growing up, the Scarlet Witch, she had her hex. She was powerful, but not like considered, whoa, she can destroy anyone. Now, if you talk to the real Marvel heads, it's like she's the most powerful creature in the universe, and that
Yeah.
seems to be where the MCU is going. When I was growing up, Dark Phoenix was, the most powerful thing, or maybe, Galactus or something like
Mhm.
that. Now everyone is. It's like, no, Doctor Strange can do this. No, the Hulk can't be beat. No, Thor is this, and
Yeah.
and that's not even really getting into the villains, except for I guess they came up with like basically their version of Satan, which is Mephisto, who's
Mhm.
you know unstoppable. And of course, DC did the same thing. All of their Aquaman went from a guy swimming around to super powered, could basically fly. Wonder Woman basically became like a rival of Superman, and
Yeah.
you know
Superman started all with all that OP stuff. Like he's very overpowered.
yeah, exactly. And then Dragon Ball Z apparently
Oh
took it to
yeah.
another level, where people are trying to. I don't watch Dragon Ball Z, but I
Don't
see
even
that
get me
people
started.
Right. Well, I might one day get you started. I'm not going to start on it, but the like the who is it? Is it Gecko?
Goku.
Goku. Okay. So people are like, Goku could kill Superman? It's like, shut up.
Yes, that is a very popular versus battle. Like they always want to see Goku versus Superman. I'm more inclined to believe Superman would defeat Goku, but there's always people believe what they want. It's fans on both sides.
Absolutely, but we're digressing. But that's
Yes.
what I do. I meander. The Garden of Doom is like a swamp, and we have tribulettes and egress and ingress and things like that. And it's a closed universe, so wherever you start, you always end up at the finish.
Memories.
Yeah, like Land of the Lost.
So after Brooklyn and Vampire in Brooklyn, right? Just a couple years later, this is when vampirism in film took another turn. So this is when Blade came out, and Blade, of course, is very popular, and it flipped the genre on its head, being that these are not really romantic vampires. They're not, sitting up in their castle somewhere looking very regal. These are dirty, dingy, like scary figures that are coming to attack you. And the fact that Blade comes, he's half vampire, half human, as you know, and he's an action hero. He's a superhero. He's fighting. Yeah, he's got his sword. He's hacking away at these vampires, and it's just really cool because it does. You see the turn again. It turns into more of a action type of a genre with Blade.
Wesley Snipes for 10 years was so cool.
Yes, he was everywhere. Like he was the popular guy. I think before this he did what was the name of that movie that came out? He was what was it called? New Jack City. He was in New Jack City, and he was so cool in that one. And I think he just took like that cool guy essence and brought it to Blade, because Blade was cool. He had the glasses.
It's awesome.
Yes, everybody wanted to be Blade because he was kicking A. He had the glasses. He had the sword, and he was just everything that you want to be as, like, someone cool in the 90s.
I mean, the opening scene is we're seeing a rave party that the vampires lure, mortals into, and they make it rain blood through the sprinklers, and then the vampires come in to basically, slaughter everyone, feed or turn, but mostly feed, because those vampires are the goth, the young, sort of like the Lost Boys looking vampires, the 90210 turns into vampire types, and then in the middle of it, Blade comes in, which they only call him the Daywalker, comes in and and basically slices and dices them all up, including the what's his name, Donald Logue, who's been an actor forever and everything. He keeps cutting off his arm.
It's just a really great film, and I did make 3 of them. I think the third one was kind of bad, but the first 2, mwah, chef's kiss.
Yes, the third one was more than kind of bad. Actually, the second one was okay. It was the first one standalone is it's a classic.
Okay. I really enjoyed the second one. I think I might like the second one better than the first one, but it's been several years since I've seen it. So
it was okay. It was like in Serbia, and then there was like the vampires evolved into more of like sort of like the strain type of, like almost like not parasitic, like viral vampires where their jaws unhinged and they sort of became like a Venus flytrap.
Oh yeah. I remember when I was younger, something about that villain was doing it for me. I don't know why. But either way, that's neither here nor there.
Right.
But that was a really interesting film, and it became so successful. And it's thanks to Blade that we have Marvel movies later down the line, because it was so successful.
Yeah, but, it actually was a lifeline for Marvel, which was financially struggling at the time, and Blade got Marvel to X-Men, which, and the rest is history.
Fantastic films, by the way. Well, the third one, who knows? But the first 2, like I said,
I like them all. But yeah, the first
really?
one is yeah, sure. I mean, listen, first of all, I was a kid seeing superhero movies on films, which was rarely done before in high quality, and you know, I'm just seeing all of the different characters that I loved reading about on screen. So it almost didn't matter what the story was. I have seen them all more recently, and yes, there's almost no plot in X3, but I like it. I like West End. I thought it was cool. I liked how Colossus was almost featured because he
Mhm.
was huge in the books, and in the movies, barely. I mean, I understand how they were trying to build towards sort of a next generation because people in real life age, in comics they don't. Um,
Mhm.
but I was happy to see Colossus. I mean, the stuff with the angel was stupid, and his father was stupid. But
Yeah.
what can you do? A producer has said Blade was the main character in an entire genre of Marvel folklore.
Yeah.
I'm not
He was
surprised.
that guy.
Yeah. What people don't know about, well, anybody who knows Anthony Missionary Thomas knows that he's a comic guy. And he's much more of a comic guy than I am. I mean, I basically stopped in by the 90s, if not by the late 80s. But so Thanos, I don't know who Thanos is, so I'm happily along for the ride. I knew Captain America got killed, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what happened after. I vaguely remember that the Falcon took over as Captain America, and then somehow they brought Steve Rogers back and stuff. But I wasn't engrossed in those books. I just
Mhm.
sort of was vaguely aware they existed. Me, it all stopped with Dark Phoenix, but then to see them basically, start with the Dark Phoenix and Magneto stuff, I'm like, this is amazing. This is like, it's like validation of my youth was no longer misspent. It was properly spent.
Right. Now you have all this information.
That's right. So that's anyway. We can move on. We can do superheroes another time. I mean, I can talk forever on these things. Um, but Mish is your guy. But shout out again to him. I have a feeling you're going to go to Underworld pretty soon.
You know what? Underworld came out a couple years after Blade, like not even long after. And you could see the influence as far as the dress. Like your producer brought up this image of Blade, and you can see he has on, the bulletproof vest, the leather, and Celine very similar in look. She does have the cool leather jacket, the like bulletproof vest almost. She's very um early 2000s, I would say. That's the early 2000s Matrix Blade aesthetic that was really popular. I did enjoy those films also. Again, the first two, the third one is so. I don't know what's going on with this third one. Third movie's for me. But yeah,
Well,
look,
they went beyond the third movie and they did something like the Revenge of the Lycans or something, which was awful. Yeah, they sort of lost their way. But yeah, the first two are great, but I mean, the first one again, classic.
yeah, I agree.
And Kate
So
Beckinsale, chef's kiss to her too.
beautiful woman, beautiful woman. She did a great job portraying the character, and her little love interest, handsome man. So great casting all around.
What happened to that guy? It's like he
who,
disappeared.
who knows? He just dropped off the face of the earth after these movies.
Who is it that's in a hit and that's going to have a franchise and decides to leave?
I have no idea. And the guy who played the wolf, he just took it and ran with it because we will talk about him later, or at least a franchise he was in momentarily when we get to Twilight.
Well,
But
he was Michael Corvinus,
yes.
and he was the first offspring of a vampire and a werewolf, which
Hmm.
let it be known that those two races didn't need to be at war. They could sort of be like the angels and humans, and form the Nephilim, the perfect mighty race.
Hmm. So he took it and ran with it. But this after Blade, and of course, right around the time that Underworld came out, there was this uh movie adaptation of Queen of the Damned.
Yep.
And it was written, of course, by the queen of vampirism, at least of that time, Anne Rice. And I loved these books. Like I've read all of the Vampire Chronicles. I love these books. My stepmother is the one who introduced me to these.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw the film, right, of course, Lestat was miscast. He should never have been cast as that. The actor shouldn't have been cast. The hair was wrong. The vibe was wrong. But Aaliyah played the queen, right? And she did a really fantastic job. She looked alluring, mysterious, powerful. And she played, of course, the Queen of the Damned. She was the original vampire in this franchise, or in this realm of vampires. And I thought this movie, even though the main character, Lestat, was a little off for me, I enjoyed this movie. I'm not going to lie. But again, we
people like that movie. It was actually a good movie. It was a fun movie. It was scary.
Yeah. The soundtrack was pretty good. I was feeling it. Look at it, beautiful. They actually look really good together. So I can't even hate.
She's looking a little Egyptian there, and he's like in the more typical goth.
Yeah. So she was actually
Gary
a
Oldman
queen
was the name I couldn't think of before.
What was the name?
Gary Oldman. He played Dracula in the Bram Stoker.
Gary.
Yeah.
You're right. He was everywhere back then. So Aaliyah did play Queen Akasha, and she does have that Egyptian aesthetic because she was the queen of Kemet Bak, where that's when she became a vampire. She was the first vampire when she was queen at that time.
And Kemet literally means black sand or black earth.
Yeah. So that's how they got that look. And it's, again, really beautiful, really alluring. So that was another great representation. And this is when we get to another shift.
I have that same outfit, by the way.
Oh, you do? Shame you didn't wear it this evening.
Yeah, it looks better on her now in hindsight.
But it was after this that vampire films kind of went silent for a while. Vampire and literature went silent for a while until the modern day queen of vampirism, like it or not, Stephanie Meyer, came out with the Twilight Saga.
Gross.
Not gross. This book and this saga of books was the book of my childhood. Like, I read these all through high school. I was in love with these books. So I can't even go into this without that bias. I'll just be honest.
It's okay. We are all a symptom of our times.
Yes. So again, like we spoke about earlier, the legends of vampires, everything gets added on a bit. So up until this point, vampires could not walk in the day unless you're like half and half, like Blade, Daywalker. But in the Twilight franchise, they can be in the day perfectly fine, but they have to remain in at least a gloomy setting because they have this sparkling skin. Which is very controversial, more so than anything else in the book. I believe this is probably the most controversial aspect of these vampires that people talk about till this day, the glittering skin. What do you think about it?
The glittering skin? Conceptually, I'm not sure. I never saw any of the Twilight movies, and I never read any of the books. Ooh. My ex-wife, we were married, obviously then, she read them all, and I think she wanted to watch the movies, but I think I tried to watch one of them and fell asleep.
Oh, man. I love these films. The first three. And I regularly go back and watch them. Maybe about once a year, I go back and watch these movies.
I don't know. This was, you know what? And I made an effort to read the Hunger Games books afterwards because I didn't want to not have another phenomenon. But the thing is, I read the first book and I'm like, I already know what's going to happen. And my ex-wife, again, wife at the time, said, no, you don't. And I said, this is what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. It's very obvious. And she's like, yeah, you're right. You don't need to read the other two books. But I did. I read all three because it was like popcorn. It was easy. It's like, beach reading. And so I could see why it was an easy phenomenon, something that parents could share with their kids and but still be different. Mm-hmm. I didn't love the movies, but we're not really talking about that. But Twilight, though, you're right. It reinvigorated the genre and probably led straight into True Blood, which was a little bit darker. Yes. And then, and also led to more literature that came out, like The Strain, The Historian, the Passage trilogy. Also, there were other vampire books that came out. And so I want to, for a second, because there wasn't a complete lull. There was this guy named Bernard Lumpley, who wrote a series of books. I mean, when I talk about a series, there might be 20 of them. And the main character, the first book is called Necromancer, or something like that. And he's British, so it's like a vampire book, but it's tied into like British science fiction, which I have a show record on British science fiction, which is going to run sometime in October. But I don't like British science fiction because it always takes it like 17 layers too far. So basically, it starts with this guy. His name is Negro Sani, and he stumbles upon like a vampire tomb, and the vampire can speak to him because he can speak to the dead, which includes the undead. So the vampire is speaking in Negro Sani's head all the time, and you hear him going, Negro Sani, and trying to influence him to do, things. But what it turns into, from a really cool premise of like the vampire trying to get this guy to maybe be his familiar and his minion and, free him or whatever the case may be, is that it became, you had the British Secret Service trying to get Negro Sani onto their team. And they're like basically building the X-Men. But the Russians were also trying to get him because the Russians also have like their own X-Men type. And then all of them have backstories, and all of them have backstories, and their backstories have backstories, and the characters have sub-characters. And like all British science fiction, it never stops until you learn about the politics of the fleas on the mouse. So I was out. And there was I think her name was Tess Taylor, something like that. She wrote a whole bunch of books which was basically like True Blood on steroids for kids. But they existed. There's also a really good book by, I think her name is Isabel Rosanova or Rosa Nostra, and she wrote a book called The Historian. It's damn near 1,000 pages long, but it's worth it. And it's basically someone who finds out that they are an ancestor or they're searching for the historic Dracula. And as it turns out, like Dracula is still alive and was sort of protecting them, and they might be a descendant of Dracula. Dracula is their ancestor, but it's spooky. It's good. It's got history in it. It's sort of, it's a good read. It's sort of like you take like James Michener or Edward Rutherford historical fiction and turn it into a mystery book with a little bit of horror in it. It's just cool. I really enjoyed it.
See, yeah, I haven't had a chance to read those, but I do know there were a couple like vampire books coming out, but none of them had that same popularity, like, the Anne Rice books or the Stephanie Meyer's books. I think True Blood, I actually did read that series before I saw the show, and the show was fantastic. I was a big fan of the show. But the books, I enjoyed the books up until a certain extent, much like the show, because after a while they started bringing in fairies and all of this other stuff, werecats, and it just became, like you said about the British science fiction, just it's too much,
Season 1 of True Blood was fantastic. Season 2 was pretty good, but I got out pretty quickly because they're in this small town. What was it called, like Bon Air or something like that?
Is it Bonton, something like that?
Yeah, Good Times, right? and after a while, I preferred Good Times with Jimmy Walker, but it was like a town. Like they would say that the population, sign at the beginning of the show, and it was like something like 2,300 people in Bonton, and it's like every third person had some sort of supernatural power. So it wasn't that super. It's sort of routine. You just had to figure it out. Like I'm cool with the vampire. I'm cool with the werewolf. I'm cool with there being an occasional witch. I'm cool with there being, what was the woman? She was Admiral Kane in it. She was like a naiad. She was basically like a harpy, a water sprite, like a sex goddess, basically. Like one of those, but like there was like everybody was something. Everybody had, there was no one in this town that didn't have some sort of power. But yeah, season 1 I thought was great, and it started losing it after that. I probably watched, I don't know how many seasons did it go, like 6?
Too many. I know that, but it was, I think the first 3 seasons, or maybe the first 2 seasons were good for me. But after that, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. It was like the old Batman movies where, they start with one villain, and by the third movie they need to have 4 villains in every movie.
So, but bringing it back to Twilight and Black vampires, there was this controversy because in the books there was the one of the members of this villainous group of vampires by the name of Laurent. He was actually white in the books, but they changed him into a Black character. And there was this whole controversy about, him being in the movie and all of that. And he had such a small part that I really didn't think it mattered one way or the other, if he was Black, if he was white, but he was in that film. And in every vampire in that movie was, I don't know, they definitely used every penny in the budget for flour or powder because they just baked everyone's face with this white chalk of a layer of white chalk, and he was no exception. There he is, Laurent. So
very pretty.
Right, very pretty. And after Twilight, of course, Twilight reinvigorated the vampire scene. Everything was about vampires for a while. And it seems like vampires come back into favor every couple of years because Buffy was very huge back in the day, right?
Sure.
And
good movie.
Yeah. Ooh, the movie.
Yeah, good movie.
Better than the show?
I don't know. I mean, I like the show, but I didn't watch it religiously. But yeah, I'm always going to prefer like an encapsulated story. I mean, I just thought it was fun and different. You sort of had the cheerleader,
Mm-hmm.
killing the vampires. It was sort of like a girl power version of the Lost Boys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Twilight is a great vampire movie.
I've never seen it.
Get off the show. Get out.
I've never seen it. And the thing is, I've heard about it so many times. I know it's really popular. I just never sat down and took a look at it. One
of the best last lines of a movie of all time. Because this entire time you think most of the town is clueless, especially the grandfather, and the boy and his grandfather are walking away. And I forgot the name of the town. Let's just say it's Long Beach. And the grandfather says to the kid who just finished this epic battle killing the vampires, and he goes, "That's always been the problem with Long Beach. Too many damn vampires."
See? And I've heard that the main character in this film is what inspired Spike in the Buffy franchise. The way he looked and everything. If you remember, Buffy was kind of stuck between later in the seasons between Angel and Spike with the blonde hair.
Yep, I remember.
And yeah, so apparently his character was modeled after D-League and Lost Boys.
Well, I think the leader, the anti-leader, but the leader of the bad faction of the vampires in Blade also was inspired by the look of the Jack Bauer? Why can't I remember his real name? Sutherland, Kiefer Sutherland, the character's look.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a very influential movie. I just never sat down and took a look at it. So I will have to do that over this weekend.
You will, yeah, for sure, yeah, definitely. It's worth your time. So yeah, but yeah, definitely the Buffys, and then Angel had a pretty successful spin-off run as well. Mm-hmm. And then you had this like the CW, like almost like the rom-coms. But you had like the Supernatural and the Vampire Diaries.
Yes, and that was another very popular show on the CW, and it was again adapted from a book. The book was horrible. I hated the book. I've read it, and I barely finished this book because it was so bad. So I think the show did it better than the book, for probably one of the first times that the show did better than the original source material.
Which one?
But the Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, the Vampire Diaries. I like the Vampire Diaries more than I like Supernatural, which I'm told I'm very much in the minority with that.
Okay, Supernatural. I would have to agree because I was a big fan of the Vampire Diaries, but I've never really watched sat down and binge watched Supernatural. So we both are in that minority together.
They were on Netflix for a time, so it was sort of easy.
See? So actually, and it was the spinoff of this show, bringing it back to vampires or Black representation in the realm of vampires, called the Originals, that came out shortly after the Vampire Diaries. I think they actually ran at the same time for a moment in time. And there was this one vampire who was turned from a slave into a vampire, similar to the Anthony in the Black Vampire, and he was a main character in that series. Again, I've never really got into that one as much, but apparently he has like a big following. I want to say his name was Marcus or
Yeah, and he was like sort of like I'll just call him a local prince in New Orleans. He had a lot of power.
Mm-hmm. So I never got into it, but I just wanted to bring attention to him because he was also
Oh, the
holding it down for the
originals.
Black.
There it is. That's
See,
right. The originals.
there he is. So when you originally approached me about us sitting down and talking about it, we talked about how we're going to discuss, vampires and African American lore, and I thought it was just a really interesting topic because more so than any other supernatural genre, I feel like Black people have been represented the most in the realm of vampirism, and I always wondered why that was, because you rarely ever see, like, let's say, werewolves, Black werewolves, or Black aliens. So maybe more so in recent times, but usually not. But when it comes to vampires, there's always a representation there. And I was asking myself, why is that? So I was thinking it's because maybe there has always kind of been like this, how do I want to say it? That Black people or Blackness rather have always been associated with the supernatural, kind of, in a way, kind of in less flattering terms when you think about Black magic and stuff like that.
Right.
But even more recent,
dark has always been associated with evil. There's light and there's dark. There's day and there's night, and one is good and one is bad. And a lot of things go back to something that simple, which is ridiculous, but I guess semi-understandable in a primitive way, anyhow.
Mm-hmm. So, but even more recently with the hashtag Black Girl Magic, there's always this association with Blackness and mythical, magical type entities, right? So I'm thinking maybe that has something to do with it, why there's such a presence of Blackness in the realm of vampires, more so than any other.
I also think that there's another thing about it, and it's similar to like the X-Men and mutants. When you become a vampire, you become part of a third and distinct separate race that all humans are theoretically united against you. And so your outwardness no longer defines you. Your skin color no longer defines them. Your gender, your ethnicity, your whatever country you're from. The fact that you're a vampire and you need to live in secrecy and feed on blood defines you. And I think that that's empowering, but it's also sort of egalitarian. Now, of course, all of them have different tiers and levels, and there's hierarchies and elders and this, that, and the other thing. But once you're a vampire, it doesn't matter what you were before you weren't. It doesn't matter if you were Christian. Doesn't matter if you were pagan. Doesn't matter if you were Black. Doesn't matter if you were Vietnamese. You're now a vampire. That's it. That is your identifying characteristic.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah, one of the things Mitch pointed out is that the rejuvenation of the vampire genre got us off of the zombie genre, which was all played out, and and then made a comeback again, and it sort of played out still, though. I don't know. There's sort of room for everything nowadays.
Yeah, zombies were really big for a while, and I think especially in areas like Haiti and stuff, zombies and like voodoo have a really big influence there. And he wrote, does Egyptian immortality have a lot to do with the crossover of vampire lore? Possibly. There is possibly that crossover, which is why we may have seen Anne Rice bring in the Queen Akasha from Egypt.
I think absolutely. I think it all goes back to Egyptian or Sumerian, take your pick. But all of the oldest mythologies, because your Greek and your Roman, they were basically takeoffs on Egyptian, and I think to a certain extent, and I know all of my shows go back to this in one way or another, and I always have to sneak a reference in, but I think it all goes back to the idea of the Anunnaki or the Watchers and the fallen angels and the Nephilim, which were, in some views were the heroes of renown or the great men of renown, but also demonic spirits. And I think I think all of that, all of that immortality, but not God immortality and not even angel immortality, but maybe part angel, all goes back to that region of the world. Who was first? I'm not sure. Whether it was Sumerian or Egyptian, don't know. Doesn't really matter. Whenever you get into Sumerian, you get into Anunnaki, then you get into the Indian Veda. Whenever you get into Egyptian, it inevitably takes you to Atlantis, and the old ones. And anything with immortality that's anti-God, anti-deity, anti-good, that, I mean, almost all religious beliefs, whatever they are, have some sort of duality, a yin and a yang, a dark and a light.
Very true. And the whole subject of Nephilim, I don't want to go too far off, but I find it very interesting. There were a couple of books that I've read when I was younger that focused on the Nephilim, and of course they were written in was it Enoch or?
Well, yes, they're in the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they're in Genesis, and the Nephilim is what probably started this show, because when I was board in services, I would pick up the Bible and I would read the Book of Genesis, and I never got past the Nephilim. I'm like, what the hell are they? What are they supposed to be?
And then that page was ripped out of the Bible, that whole book.
Well, there's plenty of copies, so I never had to deface a book. But it's easy enough to find. And then, it takes you down a rabbit hole. And then I read another book, maybe you read it too, called The Book of Joby, which was not a great book, but it introduced me to this whole other theory of Nephilim. And fast forward to now, and I'm involved in the Nephilim Anthropology Conference out of the UK. And, it's a lot of fun. So everything goes back to the Nephilim, because the Nephilim is sort of like the uncle of this show.
See, very interesting. The book I've read on it was called. It was in the Immortal Instrument series, and for a while it became very popular. They had a movie that was kind of trash, and then a series that was a little bit better. But that was kind of my introduction to the Nephilim and all of that jazz.
Very cool. All right. Well, I do think that they're all related, but definitely Egyptian, because Egyptian is much more well preserved. Once they got the Rosetta Stone, we could translate Egyptian language, and we still haven't fully translated all of Sumerian. I think we have a pretty good idea of cuneiform now, but definitely tied to it. Also, in some of the more popular books, like the Strain series, which they made a TV show of it on FX, which the first book, by the way, of the Strain is fabulous. The second two books, they get increasingly worse, but basically the Strain and the Passage trilogy, they're both based on vampirism being sort of a virus. They call them virals, at least in one of the books. Mm-hmm. But the cause is the great worm. And so you have little worms in you that goes through your blood that changes your body. But the great worm was in Africa. I can't remember exactly where in northern Africa, maybe Algeria, but it doesn't matter. It's all, it's all of that lore is going to spill over both east and south. And, obviously in Europe, you've got the Strigoi and the Umpire and the Wumpir. But yeah, there's a lot of ties to Africa and Pan-Africanism with immortality, not just in voodoo and zombies, but with vampires too, and the great worm. And the great worm is something that's in a lot of animistic and pagan religions, as is the great serpent, as is the serpent. So
yeah, even in Norse mythology, they have like this huge serpent. I forget the name, but it was some offspring of Loki. And he is actually the one that ended up killing Thor in the mythos.
Well, they kill
But
each
yeah,
other.
so it's always interesting to see how there's this similarity between these different beliefs and folklore.
Yeah, and Chinese dragons look more like snakes than they do of like Saint George killing the dragon, or from The Hobbit or whatever.
Hmm. Very true.
Also a Shang-Chi's thing. But yeah, let's get back to your narrative.
So yeah, that's pretty much the more modern vampires that I've seen, especially ones that have African American or Black representation. Since Twilight, of course, it did create this boom of vampire movies, and even like just not even dealing with vampires, just fan fictional offsets, like 50 Shades of Grey and all of those other books that came out that were really inspired by Twilight. But as far as representation in vampirism, I'm not sure of anything beyond the originals that has come out that actually had any African American representation, or anything that has been focused centrally on vampires since then. Beyond, there's really been no shows coming out as of recent, no popular movies that I know of. So it seems like it's almost time for the resurgence, because again, like I said, it seems to come out again every couple years. Every couple years, vampires come back into favor. So I'm interested to see what the next era of vampires, what it will bring.
Right, and our producer put on up on our screen that there was a cat goddess in Egypt that may possibly be the world's oldest vampire, at least recorded. Obviously, there was an oral tradition before. But let me read a quick passage. I'm not going to tell you where it comes from. Some people might recognize it. But what do you think this sounds like? He who drinks from my mouth will become like me, and I will become like him, and the hidden things will be revealed to him. So that's from the Gospel of Thomas. That's from the New Testament.
Hmm.
So he who drinks from my mouth and becomes like me sounds like a vampire, right?
Yes, it does.
If I could tell you the Gospel of Thomas, could that have been like a scene from where an evil vampire turns their prey and makes them their familiar? And I got this from a book and a guy I'm going to interview pretty soon, called Censoring God, by a gentleman named Reverend Jim Willis. He has a lot of interesting books. He's not your typical reverend, let's put it that way. And he's been a reverend for over 40 years. Mm-hmm. In any event, well, I'm not the only person out there that came to this conclusion, because there's a show on Netflix that just dropped, and I'm already half through it, called Midnight Mass. And it's like the same thing. And I highly recommend, especially if you like sort of slow burn, sort of more psychological thrillers than sort of slasher, CGI, quick, scream fest. This is more of like a Rosemary Babies kind of cadence. But I'm loving it. I think it's from the same people who brought us the Hill House, The Haunting of Hill House, mm-hmm. and the one that came out the next year. I am having senior moments all day today, but I love both of the shows. The one they had Henry Thomas in it. They had Carla Gugino, who, oh my God, talk about a boyhood crush. But those are just great shows. They're like beautiful ghost stories. And this one is a vampire story, but it's very much tied into religion. Basically, I don't want to ruin too much, but the premise is a old priest, he's from a small island, and they put together all this money because he's been on this small island his entire life, which is maybe, somewhere New England-ish or, New York. It's got a very northeast rural kind of feel to it. Mm-hmm. And they pay for him to have a mission, a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And he sort of gets lost from his group because he's sort of senile and wanders off a lot. And they lost track of him. And he basically walks the road to Damascus, walks into a sandstorm, finds like a tunnel or ancient structure. And in it, he finds what you and I would call a demon. But he's so old, he can't see. And there's like a little thing of light over its head that makes it look like a halo that he thinks it's an angel. He's convinced it's an angel. Anyway, it drinks him and then lets him drink from him. And basically, I'm not going to give up any more than that. It's pretty obvious, but chances are that it's not actually an angel, but it does beg the question: were there ever angels?
I'll add it to my watch list. We got this Midnight Mass, and we got Lost Boys.
Yeah. Well, one is probably like a 10 or 12-hour commitment. The other is just like a 2-hour commitment. But I definitely recommend it. By the way, the book The Passage, I know that's not on your list, but I thought the book The Passage by Justin Cronin was great. And the ending was perfect. And it was so successful that I am convinced that the publishers say, turn this into a trilogy. Because I read the second book, and while it was okay, it changed the ending completely. And I don't think that's what the author intended. But when they say we're going to give you a boatload of money to write more books, you don't say no. But so I don't know. I would recommend reading The Passage and screw the other two books. Don't bother if you can do it. And everything has to come back to my favorite book of all time, The Descent, because it's not specifically a vampire book, but everything that everyone's afraid of, everything that's paranormal, everything that goes bump in the night is answered in that book by a race of people called the Hadals. The movie The Descent is loosely based on it. So if you saw that, if you loved it, it's not the same book. If you hated it, it's not the same book. It's completely different. That's another one where there's a sequel. It took like 10 years or 20 years to write the sequel. It's enjoyable enough, but honestly, I would tell you just stop with The Descent and don't bother to read the second one, which is called Deeper. Salem's Lot. That's probably one of the more famous vampire books, Stephen King book. And I think they're making a movie of it. I think it's coming out soon. Yep, Mish said yes, or he mouthed it. You know anything about that? See Le Superior?
I've never heard of it. So I do know. I think the next Stephen King movie coming out I think it's called Dome or something like that. Is that the new one coming out?
Hopefully it's not Under the Dome, because CBS did a 3-season summer series called Under the Dome based on his book.
Maybe that's the one I'm thinking about. Honestly, I've never been a big fan of Stephen King. I know I'm in the minority when it comes to that. But I'm here for a little more vampires. I'm always there for it. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't catch the TV show Under the Dome. I don't think you need to. I'm sure the book was better. Truth be told, I'm not that big a Stephen King book fan either. They don't scare me. They actually, The Descent is really the only book that ever really scared me. That I was actually so scared I had to turn pages, but I almost dreaded it. Like The Stand, which I read as an adult, not a child. Every time it got scary and spooky, the scene ended. But yeah, and some of his, he's also been prolific, so he writes so much. So like The Shining is amazing. Monkey Shines is amazing. Carrie is a classic. Cujo is like, everyone's fear, because, you have these monsters like Godzilla or Jason or Freddy, which are, they're just monsters. They're trying to kill. Michael Myers personalized it a little bit more, but then they changed the story that what's her name wasn't the sister. But like Cujo, it's like everybody has a dog, and the dog turns evil. And then he was derivative on himself with Christine, and then the one with the truck. So, but he's like a machine, and a lot of stuff he writes is good, and a lot of it isn't good. But his son is Joe Hill, and he's written some great stuff too. I thought that show Nosferatu, especially the first couple seasons, was really excellent, really original. That's good vampire stuff. A little bit of a different spin. He also wrote a book called, I think it was called Heart-Shaped Box. Really good. His book Horns became a movie. It was a terrible movie.
Was that the one with Daniel, what was his name, from Harry Potter?
Yes.
Oh, I saw that movie.
Yeah, it was awful. The book is better, but Heart-Shaped Box is really good. And he he's also pretty prolific, but he's doing TV and movies at the same time. Actually, they did something. I think it was The Outsider on HBO, and not only did they collaborate on it and executive produce it, but in the last scene, Stephen King and Joe Hill played the paramedics who loaded the bodies into a ambulance.
Mm. Oh, he pulled up the picture. Yeah, I definitely saw this movie.
Yeah, Daniel Radcliffe.
Mm-hmm. He was trying to get into his bad boy bag. Like, he was done with Harry Potter. So he said, let me throw these horns on and see how it goes.
Hey, Stephen King's son, what could go wrong?
Right. Everything.
Yeah. A lot went wrong, but he's still finding himself. But you know what? He's done a lot of weird stuff, but I think at some point he's going to stumble upon something else big. The good thing for him is he doesn't have to.
Yeah. Harry Potter was such a success. And I think he did some play, was it on Broadway, where he was completely nude with a unicorn or something like that? So he's definitely doing whatever he wants at this point.
What is it with British actors and loving to be nude on Broadway?
You know, I think they feel that it makes them more of an actor. You know, if you're completely nude, there's nothing beyond that. If you can act in the nude, then you can act in anything, I'm guessing.
No, I think that makes sense, that you're completely comfortable in your own skin and even taking on other characters. So there's no, you can transgress or transmute into anything. Got it. I'm with you on that one. So other vampire stuff. I read a book called The Vampire of New York, which I actually enjoyed quite a bit. Some people might not because it sort of is like, the spin of it is that Dracula never was a villain. He was always trying to be a hero, and he's really a hero. It's just because of what he is and because of what followed him. He always got he was always like sort of the bad guy, sort of like the old Spider-Man, you know, where J. Jonah Jameson always labeled him the villain, even though he was the good guy. He was the misunderstood good guy. That's sort of how Dracula was. That the world cast him as a bad guy, even though he tried to do heroic things.
See, that's what I feel like. If someone's been a bad guy long enough, there will always be these books that come out that tries to flip it on his head and say, no, this is what he really was, a good guy or had good intentions. Like, you know, Lucifer. There's those books and shows about him.
Sure.
There's what was the other son of King Arthur? I forget his name, but I believe it starts with an M. And they had a whole thing about him actually being a good guy.
Modred.
And you know.
Modred was the evil son.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So there was a book that I read when I was younger,
and it was with his half sister.
Oh yeah,
Morgana Le Fay.
Yes, but they tried to, you know, paint him as this sympathetic anti-hero, and yes, it seems like if you live long enough to be a villain, you turn into a sympathetic hero at one point in time, which is really interesting.
I can't remember Gary Oldman, but I can remember Morgana Le Fay.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I know, exactly right. But yeah, I think if you look hard enough, you can find the influence of the vampire in a lot of different places. Oh, What We Do in the Shadows is a comedy shot sort of Office style. It's on FX. It's got to be one of the best comedies maybe ever, except it's only in its third season, so I can't say it yet. But if it keeps on this trajectory, it's going to get there. And the guest stars in it are amazing because they just want to be part of the show. So Dave Bautista had like a bit role. Mark Hamill had a role. It's just, I mean, so many like really famous actors in really tiny little roles. And it's sort of shot like Office, Modern Family, Parks and Rec, sort of pseudo documentary style. And
is this a British show, or is this like American Office?
No, it's American. And one of the characters is an emotional vampire, and he basically bores people or gets negative emotions out of them, and he feeds off them. So he goes to work at offices, and no one's even sure he works there. He's just there to, you know, to like feed off people being miserable in the office, because there's nothing more miserable than being in a cubicle, and like he's happy about it, so they're even more miserable, and he makes small talk and no one wants to talk to him. And there was like one episode where he kept getting promoted and he was just miserable, and then he met another vampire who sort of fed off you fed off emotional vampires, so he kept
Yeah, so he's a literal emotional vampire. He's
right.
sucking.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, we all have them in our family or in our extended group, like the one person or people who come into the room and you're just like, oh no, oh, I need a nap.
Mm-hmm.
And he was that guy. But the whole thing is hysterical. There's this episode where Laszlo has to go on the run because he's being chased by a vampire assassin because he transgressed, and he disguises himself as a perfectly normal human bartender serving perfectly normal human beverages, alcoholic beverages, because they don't drink. And the vampire assassin, who's played by Mark Hamill, stumbles into his bar, and he re-identified himself as Jackie Daytona, and everybody loves Jackie Daytona there. And Mark Hamill doesn't recognize him, and they're both pretending to drink a beer, and they're both like waiting for the other one not to look, and they throw it over their shoulders.
Mm. I'll have to add that to the list too. My list is ever growing.
Yeah. Well, this one's easy because they're like 30, 35-minute shows. There's only 2.5 seasons so far. And, you could easily catch up. And they're hysterical. You'll very enjoy it. And our producer says it's on Hulu as well.
Perfect.
But yes, it does get deep into the familiars and the thralls, blood lineage. It doesn't skimp on gore. Talks about territory, but the funny thing is their territory is Staten Island. So, what's more banal than that? So it's very cleverly written. I don't know. It's well worth watching. And of course, the familiar Guillermo is somehow a descendant of Van Helsing. And so I like this little sort of, fat young adult, when he springs into action against vampires, it's like he's like Blade. He's like a super ninja.
You know what? Speaking of Van Helsing, there was that movie that came out in the early 2000s with Hugh Jackman and the actress we mentioned her moments ago from Underworld.
Kate Beckinsale.
Yes. I don't know if you remember that movie. I don't think it took, honestly. I don't think a lot of people really enjoyed it, but it's interesting, if that's your kind of movie, it was all right. Nothing too.
No. It wasn't all right. This was in like the like when they did like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and like, everything was trying to be like Hellboy, but nothing sort of got it right. Mm-hmm. But there's a Van Helsing series also with, I guess, his great granddaughter or something. That's better, but I think that was also on FX. I'm pretty sure that's on Netflix also. I didn't watch a lot of it, but Kate Beckinsale. Yeah, she's her, Carla Gugino, Halle Berry, Selma Hayek, and Morgan Fairchild is like, and back to Cheryl Ladd and Raquel Welch. That's sort of like my lineage of, boyhood crushes. By the way, Morgan Fairchild follows me on Twitter.
Oh, nice.
and I'm so excited about that. I'm like, Morgan frickin' Fairchild follows me.
You know what? He brought up the Castlevania on Netflix, and I have not seen it. There's something I do enjoy anime, but something about that style of anime never catches me. I might check it out because I've heard some good things about it. But yeah, I've always see it on Netflix. Every time I log in, Netflix is pushing the show on me as like highly recommended.
Yeah.
So
I'm surprised that you didn't bring that one up, because there's a lot of vampires, including monsters that are vampire-like in anime as well. I mean, of course, there's the whole hentai, I think it's called.
Oh.
And then and then there's like and then like Eska says that not hentai.
I don't think it's hentai.
No. I think he's saying I shouldn't bring it up or go there. Manga. Okay, all right. Hentai is like the monster porn or something. I need to. I know so little about anime, but I'm actually doing a show on anime in the near future, and because I know nothing, it's going to be a primer. It's going to be like 101 to 201 for someone like me. So, I don't know why you're laughing. I mean, we're allowed to say porn on this show. Actually, I mean, we haven't cursed yet, but I sometimes put the explicit on there. The funny thing is, tomorrow on the Land of the Lost one, we'll definitely put the explicit, because I'm going to do it right now, because I use the wrestling line. Why did this happen? Because fuck you, that's why. So I taught these nice two suburban girls or women to say "fuck you." That's why they do it on to you now. So it's a lot of fun. So and I'm saying tomorrow because we're recording that tomorrow. And those of you who are regular listeners to the show, you know that I don't necessarily drop the shows in the same order I record them. So this should come as no surprise to you. But if it does, that's why that makes no sense to you. But anyway. What else can you tell me about vampires and any other sort of African American, Black lore, literature in the horror, vampire adjacent realms?
You know what? That's all I had prepared for today. But I did enjoy talking with you all about, vampirisms and all of that. And I appreciate the invite on the show. I had a great time. It's a very extensive subject as far as vampires. They've been around for many, many years, and we could go on forever. But I did enjoy this conversation with you, and I hope to be back again when, if you ever get a chance to invite me on. But yeah,
as long as I have Sundays, I have content that I need. So believe me, I'm gonna come back to you for a bunch of stuff because you're into geek culture, and a lot of this show is geek culture. And geek culture also blends into what I will call, without pejorative, pseudoscience culture, paranormal research culture, which I love. I don't diminish it at all. And I absolutely believe more in aliens than I do in angels and demons. I just think that they're the same thing. So there we go. Oh my God, I gave away the ending. Cancel the show. I spoiled the end.
But thank you for having me on.
The island unlost. It was purgatory all along.
Oh snap! Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert from a show that went off the air 13 years ago. But I'm the worst. All right. Thank you very much. See the Superior. Tell them where they can find you.
You can find me again on YouTube at See the Superior, or on Instagram at See the Superior. I post funny things, just come and talk to me. I'm there.
She has some powerful eyebrows, so she makes some powerful expressions with her face.
Yes, I do. So,
she knows how to use them.
Yes.
It's so like ZZ Top legs, except it's eyebrows.
Yeah, come and take a look at my eyebrows. Tell me how they look. Let's chat with a little eyebrow.
You and my girlfriend La Sicaria can have an eyebrow battle.
See, eyebrows are where it's at. Your face isn't complete unless you have a great set of eyebrows.
See the Superior and La Sicaria would make a daunting tag team.
See, I'm down for it.
Those of you who want to know where La Sicaria is, she's in South America, unstabilizing governments, stabilizing other things, fulfilling contracts, leaving blood trails wherever she goes. Showing off those fabulous eyebrows. Listen, everything about her is fabulous. She's a work of art. I must be Nephilim that I found this one. Oh, that's adorable. But again, thank you all. And again, follow me on Instagram at See the Superior and shoot me a message. Thank you so much for coming on, C. Really appreciate it. We're definitely going to call on you again. All right. See you guys. The Garden of Doom with Jeff Lipman.